He stood alone behind the barricade, in full uniform, ignored by all, until a staffer told him he didn't belong there. Pushed to the back, he said nothing. But a boy noticed the blue ribbon on his chest, and his father knew what it meant. The parade stopped. A captain saluted, and the forgotten old man was suddenly the center of a nation's attention. One by one, veterans lined up to honor him. A child gave him a drawing, and the crowd finally saw who he truly was. He walked home alone, as quietly as he arrived. But now, the silence around him was filled with gratitude. Leonard Hale arrived 2 hours before the Veterans Day parade began. He moved slowly, relying on a well-worn wooden cane and a quiet determination. At 89, he wasn't as fast as he once was, but he still made the walk to Main Street every year, dressed in his Sunday-best navy blazer, a pale blue shirt, and a single red carnation tucked into his breast pocket. Pinned neatly on his coat were 3 military ribbons and an old brass name tag. His shoes were polished, though scuffed with age, and his fingers trembled slightly as he unfolded a small fabric American flag and rested it gently across his lap. Leonard chose a seat near the front, a folding chair by the barricades, placed early by volunteers. He sat alone, just behind the VIP section, hoping to get a clear view of the marching bands and the color guard. He didn't carry a ticket or a printed pass. He never needed one before. As the sun climbed higher, people began to arrive in waves. Families with young children, city officials, active-duty military in dress uniform. There was laughter, music from nearby speakers, and the smell of hot dogs drifting from a food truck. Then came a young event staffer, clipboard in hand, headset around his neck, scanning rows for registered guests. "Sir," he said, blinking at Leonard. "I'm sorry, this section is for reserved attendees only. Do you have a wristband or pass?" Leonard smiled politely. "No, I just came to watch." "I'm afraid I'll have to ask you to move behind the viewing zone," the staffer said. "This area is for families of honorees." Leonard nodded. He didn't argue. He stood up, straightened his coat, and walked slowly toward the back of the crowd, flag still folded in his lap, eyes still calm. He didn't want to be a problem. He just came to remember. Leonard found a quiet spot near the back, by a lamppost just outside the barricaded viewing area. The spot didn't have a clear line of sight, but he didn't mind. He leaned gently against the pole, both hands resting on his cane. The folded flag sat between his elbow and chest like a keepsake, too precious to be stuffed in a bag. From where he stood, the parade was just beginning. Trumpets blared down the street, and bright uniforms sparkled in the morning sun. Children squealed with excitement as the first floats passed by, followed by marching cadets and motorcycle veterans waving to the crowd. No one noticed Leonard. People stepped in front of him without apology. A teenager, no older than 16, took out his phone and filmed himself yelling, "Happy Vets Day, bro!" before bumping Leonard's shoulder on the way back to his friends. He said nothing, just steadied himself again. Nearby, a woman whispered to her husband, "That poor old man looks like he doesn't even belong here." Another chuckled softly and said, "Probably just wandered in for free food." Still, Leonard stayed. And then, something shifted. A boy, maybe 10 years old, stood near the front barricade with his father. He was fiddling with a toy soldier and half watching the parade when his eyes happened to settle on Leonard's chest. He leaned forward, squinting, then tugged on his father's sleeve. "Dad, that medal, that one right there," the boy pointed. "Isn't that the one from the book we read?" The father looked over, expecting to see a typical collection of pins and ribbons, but then he froze. His eyes locked on the medal pinned just above Leonard's heart, a light blue ribbon with white stars hung from a neck drape. He knew that medal. Every soldier did. The Medal of Honor. The man's jaw tightened. He put a hand on his son's shoulder, then stepped away from the crowd, eyes focused now, purposeful. He wasn't just anyone. His name was Captain Marcus Doyle, active-duty Army officer and longtime historian of military valor, and he knew exactly what that ribbon meant and what it cost to earn. He began walking straight toward Leonard Hale. Captain Marcus Doyle moved quickly but calmly, weaving through the crowd with his eyes locked on the man by the lamppost. He wasn't angry, not exactly, but there was a weight behind each step, the kind of weight carried by someone who understood what honor meant and what it looked like when forgotten. Leonard Hale didn't notice him at first. He was watching a group of young Marines pass by in perfect formation, their boots pounding the pavement in crisp rhythm. A flicker of a smile touched the corner of his lips, faint, proud, private. "Sir," Doyle said as he approached, standing just in front of the older man. Leonard looked up, blinking once behind thick glasses. "Yes?" The captain straightened. His voice dropped, almost reverent. "Is that the Medal of Honor, sir?" Leonard paused, then gave a small, reluctant nod. "Yes, it is." Doyle stood in silence for a beat, then saluted, sharp, clean, and from the heart. "I'm sorry, sir. You should not be standing back here." Leonard looked down at his cane, then back at the captain. "I'm fine. I didn't want to make a fuss." But the moment had already begun to spread. The salute had been seen. Another soldier in the crowd noticed, then another. A pair of Marines walking by in the parade caught sight of the scene and froze. They turned, saw the ribbon, the pale blue, star-dotted ribbon that only 3,500 people in American history had ever earned, and stopped marching mid-stride. Within moments, the front of the parade began to slow. A band conductor raised his hand to signal pause, confused by the disruption. A group of cadets halted in tight rows. Officers along the barricade turned to see what had caused the disturbance. And then, just like that, everything stopped. Not with chaos, not with commands, but with awareness. Captain Doyle turned toward the event staffer, the same one who'd removed Leonard from the front area just 30 minutes earlier, and gestured him over. "Do you know who this man is?" Doyle asked. The young man blinked, flustered. I thought he didn't have a pass. I didn't—" "This man," Doyle said, voice steady but firm, "is Sergeant Leonard Hale. He received the Medal of Honor for actions during the Battle of Chosin Reservoir. He held his position under enemy fire for 36 hours to protect a wounded unit. He saved 14 lives. And today," he turned toward the quiet crowd, "he was asked to move because no one recognized him." The microphone from the grandstand picked it up. Someone had turned the audio feed on. Gasps rippled through the gathering. Parents turned to their children. Veterans in uniform stepped forward. The parade, for the first time in years, came to a complete halt. Captain Doyle extended his arm. "Sir, would you please allow us to escort you to the front?" Leonard hesitated. Then, with a sheepish smile and trembling hands, he nodded. Two young cadets stepped forward instinctively, helping him walk toward the front platform. Each step felt like the reversal of a world gone blind, a march not of pride, but of long overdue recognition. As Leonard reached the viewing stand, the announcer's voice came back online. "Ladies and gentlemen, please rise and honor Sergeant Leonard Hale, United States Army, recipient of the Congressional Medal of Honor." The entire crowd stood. Soldiers saluted. Civilians clapped. And for the first time that morning, Leonard Hale didn't feel like a forgotten man. He felt seen. He felt home. The parade never fully resumed the way it was planned. Yes, the floats kept moving, and the bands played their songs, but the energy had shifted. Everything that came after Leonard Hale's walk to the front felt more like a tribute than a celebration. From the viewing stand, Leonard sat quietly, hands resting on his cane, the flag tucked neatly beside him. He didn't wave. He didn't smile for the cameras. He simply watched, eyes sharp, taking in each uniform that passed like he was counting old friends. And in many ways he was. The announcer spoke again, this time more solemnly. Sometimes history doesn't march down the street. Sometimes it stands silently among us, waiting to be remembered. Local reporters rushed in, cameras flashing, microphones extended. One leaned in close. "Mr. Hale, could you tell us what it means to receive this level of recognition today?" Leonard looked at her, kind but distant. "It means they remembered the men I lost. That's all I ever wanted." Behind him, Captain Doyle remained standing, arms behind his back, acting as quiet sentinel. The event staffer who had removed Leonard earlier stood nearby, too, his face pale, shoulders slumped. After a few long minutes, the young man approached. "Sir, I'm sorry. I didn't know. I should have looked closer." Leonard studied him, then gently replied, "That's the thing about respect, son. It's not just for people you recognize. Sometimes you give it because someone might need it." The young man nodded, ashamed but grateful. As the final units of the parade passed by, something unusual happened. Veterans from different wars, Vietnam, Desert Storm, Iraq, Afghanistan, stepped out of the crowd and formed an informal line. One by one, they approached Leonard Hale, removed their hats, and saluted him. He returned each one. A small boy from earlier, the one who had recognized the medal, came forward with a folded piece of paper. "I drew this for you," he said. It was a picture of a man standing tall beneath fireworks, saluting the flag. Leonard took the paper as though it were made of glass. "Thank you," he whispered. The cameras captured none of that. It wasn't part of the official program. But for those who were there, it became the most unforgettable moment of the day. As the crowd began to thin and the last echoes of the parade faded into afternoon quiet, Leonard Hale stood slowly from the viewing stand. Captain Doyle offered his arm, but Leonard shook his head with a faint smile. "I walked into that crowd on my own," he said softly. "I think I can walk out the same way." He adjusted his blazer, placed the boy's drawing carefully into his pocket, and took one last look at the now empty street. The same lamppost where he had once stood alone now bore a small American flag, tied there by someone unknown. Leonard began the long walk down Main Street, moving slowly past rows of folding chairs and scattered confetti. No music played now. No speeches. Just the sound of his cane tapping pavement and a few quiet voices saying thank you as he passed. He didn't seek the spotlight. Never had. But that day, for the first time in decades, the weight he carried felt just a little lighter. Not because of a chair, or a medal, or a headline, but because someone had looked close enough to see what others missed. The voiceover closes. Real honor doesn't ask to be noticed. It waits patiently, quietly, until someone chooses to look deeper. And when they do, the world stands still.